verse instructing a person to reprove their fellow concludes with mention of avoiding sin. But what is the nature of this sin?
When we look to early rabbinic literature, we find that the commandment to rebuke is understood as promoting a dangerous activity.
According to the early midrash Sifra on the book of Leviticus, the prohibition against hatred in one's heart applies only to internalized emotions, but actions such as hitting, cursing, and slapping are actually permitted as forms of rebuke. Interpreting the middle of our verse, Sifra asserts that even if you've rebuked a person 4 or 5 times, you should continue confronting them. Now, one might think that you should continue rebuking them even if the other person's countenance changes, but the verse says, do not incur sin. That is, do not embarrass the other person.
We can imagine a rebuker careening down a roller coaster towards disaster.
Encouraged to hit, curse, and slap the other person, they're commanded to continue rebuking until the other person's countenance changes and they become embarrassed, at which point the rebuker's attempt to fulfill the biblical commandment of rebuke has turned into transgression of sin.
As you can imagine, the rabbis are quite alarmed by such a dangerous obligation. The midrash thus continues with the voices of several rabbis who declare this commandment inoperative in their day and age.
Rabbi Tarfon said, by the temple there's no one in this generation who's able to rebuke. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah said, by the temple there's no one in this generation who's able to receive rebuke. Rabbi Akiva said, by the temple there's no one in this generation who knows how to rebuke.
All 3 rabbis reject rebuke and proclaim it ineffective in their day. And not only out of fear of falling into sin, the early rabbis were also greatly concerned with the social consequences of rebuke.
They imagined that by rebuking the Israelites in the desert, Moses damaged his relationship with them. For what reason did all of the children of Israel weep for Aaron for 30 days? But for Moses, only some of the children of Israel, and not all of the children of Israel wept for him? Because Aaron never said to a man or woman, you sinned. But Moses, because he rebuked them, it was said about him that only some of the children of Israel wept for Moses.
In another early midrashic work, Sifrei Devarim, the rabbis suggest that if you really have to rebuke someone, it's best to push it off as long as possible.
They provide 3 reasons why one should ideally wait until they're about to die in order to rebuke someone. So that you do not need to rebuke them over and over again, so that their friend does not see them and they become embarrassed, so that they do not hold it in their heart against you. When we look closely at the 3 reasons to avoid rebuke, we find something quite intriguing. The 3 reasons Sifrei Devarim gives to avoid rebuke align with the 3 dangerous parts of the biblical commandment that one should rebuke. The fear of rebuking over and over corresponds to the commandment to rebuke over and over. The concern over embarrassment has a direct parallel with the possible sin of embarrassing the other person. And the anxiety over the person holding it in their heart against you is the inverse of the biblical prohibition of you holding hatred in your heart against them. In essence, the 3 reasons to avoid rebuke directly negate the 3 parts of the biblical verse commanding rebuke.
The early rabbis thus present rebuke as a dangerous commandment that no one in their generation is capable of fulfilling, and ideally, one should postpone as long as possible.
In the next video, we'll see the shift from how these early rabbis react to rebuke to how the later rabbis of the Talmud respond to this biblical obligation to confront someone for wrongdoing.